if it is the morning still, I'm not even sure. Is it morning still? Message today where Rev Sam and I are going to talk about the message that we have this week. And see I picked a couple of them, so I need to figure out which one I want to go with. Let's see the lights up. Many of the circumstances among us have intervened, and yet to help a person in need, even when they needed it. Most of us have fallen short of someone who
Okay, welcome back, everybody. We lost each other for 8 minutes. So well,
So my entire reading.
your entire reading is gone, but that's okay. So I've always felt, and we've shared this before, that it's really important to hear spiritual leaders share from their heart. And sometimes it's easy to hide behind a formal sermon, and it's easy to hide behind, an article or something like that. And we never get to the heart of what's going on as ministers and as church leaders, as spiritual leaders. And we are human. We struggle like everybody else. And for those of us, some clergy, some ministers, it's easy to hide behind the Bible, a liturgy, a prescribed topic, but we face our own weaknesses, and we face our congregation's weaknesses. We face our own ministry's weaknesses. We face our own failures throughout the week and the month. And here we are at the end of April. We reached kind of sometimes the end of our wits, and it could be family, it could be ministry, but we struggle with where we're at. And so Joella had this idea of us just kind of free flowing today and speaking from our heart. And I think that's good, because we don't do that often enough as ministers. We hide our weaknesses behind our performance. And I think that's a shame, because sometimes we don't feel like performing. Sometimes we don't feel like preaching. Sometimes we don't feel like teaching. It's kind of like the computer. We had to switch computers here right in the middle of this. And it's a computer. It came on, we plugged it in, and everything looked like it was working, but it was just kind of herky-jerky and wouldn't start. And so we finally had to go back with the original computer that we had there, and it works fine.
I feel like addressing things like this too kind of takes us off of that pedestal that some people put us on as ministers. And it shows that we are just as human as everybody else.
Yeah. And ministers don't we don't like to show that side of us, because we're supposed to be
on all the time.
On, yeah. I knew a pastor who was very influential in my life, who would never admit that he was having a bad day or sick, or he prayed for everybody. He was a loving, caring pastor, but nobody knew how to pray for him, because he would never, even to the very end of his life, was he kept it very close to the vest, his weaknesses. And so this week, a couple of things have come to my life, in my heart, that I've been thinking about. And part of it is as my role as a leader in my denomination, in our denomination, and even in our own work, in our wedding officiant work that we do. And that is and just current events, the dramatic, the painful amount. It's awful. So much transphobia out there that is plaguing us and plaguing our society, plaguing our politics. People are so desperately afraid of trans individuals. And I've tried to make some statements and make some writing about that. All of our friends and brothers and sisters in our denomination, the Progressive Christian Alliance, that are members of the LGBTQIA community, and I feel like there's this attack at them that's coming from so-called Christians who are supposed to love everybody, but not them. And it's been just plaguing my heart and soul. And my heart breaks for those people because they're just trying to fulfill their calling and trying to live out their calling. And I feel like, and I know so many transgender Christians and pastors and ministers that are just trying to do what God has called them to do. And our politics and our communities are desperately working to destroy them and to put them back into a hiding where they don't come out. And I think that is a sickness. And if we can't find grace in that and the ability to love them, it's breaking my heart, and it's been bugging me because I feel like we need to say more and do more and be more in spite.
I just had an idea. I know, because I am actually a part of the LGBTQ community. So I have a lot of trans friends and a lot of non-binary friends. And one of the things that I've heard more often than not are people making excuses as to not being able to understand the perspective of that trans person or that non-binary person, because they don't understand how they're getting this idea of, multiple genders or what have you. If we think about it though, essentially becoming trans or, being gender fluid, non-binary, what have you, that's a choice that person is making because that's what they feel in their heart to show up as. I could show up tomorrow dressed in jeans and a ball cap, and maybe I'm having more of a masculine day that day. And but the thing that came to my mind is how many of us, when we were children, wanted to be doctors or lawyers or ministers or what have you, and so many of them have different uniforms that they wear. We were allowed that choice to show up, and some of that though too, if we take it back a few years, women were actually excluded from being able to choose their profession. A lot of them were subjected to having to be at home, stay-at-home mothers, and to take care of the home and take care of their husbands. But we've come out of that. Well, for the most part, we've grown, as a country, as a community, we've grown out of that. But we need to look at it from that perspective. These people, their choice is to honor themselves in the way that they show up in the world. And that could be, a male to female trans person who feels like they are more feminine and they would like to wear more feminine type clothes. It could be a gender fluid person who, from day to day, but it's, at the end of the day though, it's not, that's that person's choice to make. It's not up to us to decide what they should or shouldn't be.
Yeah.
And it's really disrespectful to make fun of those people for showing up as authentically as they'd like to show up.
Yeah.
Or to judge them for it.
From the very beginning of this ministry and the very beginning of our work, we set out to be fully affirming and inclusive of members of the LGBTQ community. We set that out. And if people have a problem with that, we have always said, so be it. We're not going to try to change. We really have always truly believed that every one of us is loved by God. Every one of us is loved by God. And whether, wherever you fall theologically or whatever, every one of us is. And if people have a problem with the fact that there are transgender Christians and Christians that are members of the LGBTQ community, that's your problem.
Right.
That's not God's problem. That's not our problem. You are welcome. And so what's been on my heart this week is the importance of stressing that over and over and over and over again. And and it's a hard for me, coming from my background as an evangelical pastor and minister. Um, that was a transition that I made, and am happy with where I am. And I really truly believe that it's a journey that God has taken me on.
Right.
And it's been my privilege to um, baptize transgender clergy with their new names. It's a beautiful experience. It's been my privilege to bury individuals, partners that are LGBTQ. It's been my privilege to be there as a pastor to support them. It's been my privilege as a minister and a pastor and an officiant to officiate their weddings and see the amount of love and compassion that comes from those people. This last week, I did a same-sex wedding, and the mother of one of the brides just grabbed me and hugged me and was like, "Thank you. We wanted a minister to marry our daughter, and we couldn't find one." And they live down in, the Springs. And so I was assigned that, and I went down there and did it. And it was just so moving to me, because they were like, we were just, they are Christians. They love God. They just had no answer. So one of the things that's been heavy on my heart this week as a pastor is, how do we communicate love to our siblings that are transgender and members of the LGBTQ community? Because I'm sure that even within the community, there's struggles of who's accepted and not. And I was listening to somebody that was speaking, and I had to jot those words down. It's been sitting on my desk for a long time. And it was just something that came to me, and I had to put it up, whether somebody likes it or not. It seems like that's where I'm always kind of halfway on the bubble of being rejected from somebody. And I'm okay with that. If you don't like what I'm saying, great.
Some rejections are they're blessings in disguise.
I kind of wear it as a badge of honor. And if you don't like it, tough toenails, I guess is how we put it.
While you're looking for that, my answer to like how we can show up, we just get louder.
Mm-hmm.
It's time for us to get louder as allies, as community members.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. So I think it was, I can't remember who said this, and I kind of adapted it and made it, but I'll figure it out. Eventually, I want to make sure we give credit to who credit is due.
Mm-hmm.
But the statement was the LGBTQIA. Mm-hmm. All right. Are all of these initials stand for a person who is unconditionally loved by God and is created in God's image. Every single one of those people that are represented under that definition. I'm going to stand with that all of those initials represent a person who is unconditionally loved by God. If you don't like it, God still loves you. If you don't like it, I'll still preach God's love. But I hope in my prayer, in my heart, I hope that you would out there would pray for yourself and ask God to give you some guidance and wisdom. And it honestly is not just Christians that have a chip on their shoulder or have a hard time understanding. It's everyone.
It's people from all religions, all faith backgrounds.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. If you don't understand, ask. Oh my God, it's so simple. I hear people tell me that all the time. Somebody, when we redid our website for the wedding business, I think you put pronouns in there. And somebody called me up. They wanted us to do their wedding. I can't remember if we actually did their wedding. It was a Wedgwood. Shouldn't say that word. But He was like, man, you guys are obsessed with pronouns, aren't you? And I said, for some people, it's very, very important. And we're going to honor that and respect that. But so speaking from my heart today is on the value of every individual and supporting marriage equality, supporting our LGBTQIA brothers and sisters and siblings, wherever they fit in the spectrum. They're loved by us. They're welcome here. We are going to be there for them. And not just within the four walls of our chapel, but outside, out the door, in the city, in the streets, in the community. We're going to be there for them. And so that's been on my heart this week. I don't have all the answers, but it's where my heart's at.
We are actually hosting a Pride wedding event here in the chapel the weekend of Pride here in Denver.
Mm-hmm.
We haven't ironed out all of the details on that yet, but
we have 1 month to do it.
Yep, got a month to do it.
We got a month to put it up.
Yes.
So where have you been at this week? You have a much more. You have a lot on your plate as well.
Diverse brain overload. Where I've been at this week is working through my own healing with regard to repressed anger and repressed shame. The ways that, this actually piggybacks really well off of the conversation that we were just having about trans people. Where growing up, I had all of these people, standing over top of me saying, you have to be this way. And where I was so desperately trying to break out of that shell and be myself. And when I tried to do that, I had a lot of people angry with me. And that's followed me a lot into my adult relationships and, even now into the relationships that I have with the kids that I'm raising, and even friendships for that matter. But for so long, I have been trying to find a way to just break free of all of these ideas and that other people have imposed on me. And with all of these ideas that these people are imposing on me, there comes a point where I have so much anger built up inside my body and so much shame that it causes disease, that it causes me to show up less authentically than I want to. And it takes away from the passions that I have on how I want to show up in the world, which, if my vision for the passion that I'm really delving into now, if that really takes off the way I envision it, if I could have got started on that 10, 20, 30 years ago, I can only imagine, the things that I could have accomplished already. But I'm starting from scratch, and I'm excited and I'm passionate about all of it. And I'm looking back on all these instances of how people have harmed me and how I've had to just stuff that down. And in many of those instances, like in instances with my own father or my parents, for example, where I was harmed either emotionally or physically, and I had to stuff that down, and I wasn't allowed to say how I was feeling. And so now I'm an adult and I'm working through all of these traumas, and I have so much of this anger, and there are diseases and things that my body has just completely shut down in ways that, had I not had to go through all that, had I not had all of this stored anger for so many years, I would have been healthier.
Yeah.
I would have been able to accomplish more. I would have so many things.
Yeah. Well, I watch you here charge through all of this. And for you as a spiritual leader, as you as a pastor, as a minister, I watch you in your vulnerability and your pain charge through the day. And and accomplish something every day. May not feel like that, but I watch you from one office to the other, and when the door's closed, I know you're working through something, and so I don't interrupt you. But I think that's kind of where all of us as human beings are. We don't look at our vulnerability, and that's what we start off talking about. That's what pastors do. We're the worst at being vulnerable, because we want to tell everybody we've got the answers and demonstrate it and live it out. And in true reality, we're just human beings like everybody else. And it doesn't matter what religious path you're on, or what path you're on in life. You still are. We're all people who struggle with being vulnerable and open to our own pain and struggles. And so the other side of that kind of piggybacks on what you're talking about. Is the other thing that I've been really processing is the idea of forgiveness, what that means. People are afraid of that because it seems impossible. Forgiveness, even to the point where people don't like to talk about it. So we just say, well, it really doesn't exist. And I think for me, forgiveness is real. It's a real need in our life. And it starts off with first learning how to forgive yourself, and so, and the second one is learning how to forgive others. The example that comes to my mind is I really hadn't had much to do with my mom and dad got a divorce when I was 8. So I didn't have much to do with my dad. I can pick out 12, 20, all these years where I would have one moment where I'd have a connection with my dad. And then there was this big long period where I had none. And then at the very end of his life, the last 5 years of his life, all of a sudden I have this relationship with this man. And part of me said I couldn't find it in me to be angry with him. I kept thinking I should be because my brothers and sisters were. But the biggest thing that came to my mind is when I was 12, he told me I was adopted. So I went my whole life from till I was 12 years old thinking he was my father.
Right.
And then I find out at 12 that he wasn't my father, and nobody in my family would talk to me about who my biological father was. And then at the end of his life, I had this connection with him, and I didn't even really have to forgive him. I didn't have anything to be angry with him about. I had stopped being angry with him years ago. And but at the end of his life, I had this relationship, and somewhere in that, I don't know where it was, but I found forgiveness, and still considered him my father. So sometimes it's not a matter of even saying, I forgive you, I forgive me. It's just being in that space. And I just wasn't angry with him anymore. I don't know if I ever was angry with him. I just didn't understand, So I've been thinking about forgiveness a lot this week, and just how important it is and valuable it is. And we all struggle. There's kind of a new mindset to, stray away, to get away from forgiveness. We don't talk about it. It's kind of an old-fashioned thing, or I don't know what it is, but we don't want to be in that moment. And I've just found in my life, sometimes you have to forgive. You have to live in it.
So something that I've recently learned, because so many people do find it difficult to say the word forgiveness and apply it to the people that have harmed them. Switching out the word forgiveness for the phrase, or for the word release.
Okay.
So as using it as an example in what you dealt with your dad, it would be releasing that idea of who he was supposed to be for you.
Yeah.
And when you found out that you were adopted and he's no longer the father figure that you were thinking he was supposed to be, that allowed for you to find that forgiveness.
Yeah. Yeah. And it was, it answered when he told me I was adopted. As I grew up, it answered a lot of questions. It answered a lot of questions about the way he treated me. He was never mean to me, but there were things like, there's things that he would do for my brothers and sisters because they were his biological children that he wouldn't do for me. And he would say, your mother will do this, and your grandparents would, one, I have in my mind, I'm there, I could go there. In my family, we were always buying, it was a big deal to buy a winter coat. So we went to some department store, and my dad was buying us winter coats. So he took all four of us, and we were all picking out coats. And then he said, I'll never forget, he said to me, your grandparents will buy you your coat. And so I took it off, and my grandparents brought me back to get that coat. Part of me at the time was like, oh, I guess I'm special. I'm better than everybody else because grandma and grandpa are buying me my coat.
Right.
But it always happened that he wouldn't do for me what he would do for my brothers and sisters. So I kind of grew up probably that rotten, spoiled grandchild. I was the oldest, and but it all made sense at some point after I was 12. Yeah, now it makes sense. He wasn't really my father, but at the end of his life, we had this incredible relationship. And the last 5 years of his life, he was my father, and it was weird because there wasn't animosity or anger or unforgiveness. I just accepted it from that point, and that was it. I could not deal with the past.
Yeah.
It was too long ago, and I didn't even know how I really felt about that. But you're right. It had to be a conscious, even an unconscious releasing of that.
I just recently found that with my own dad.
Mm-hmm.
Like even up until the point when he died, I still had all of that anger, like he was my father, and I couldn't be around him. I couldn't face him because there was so much hurt and pain there. And then going into officiating his funeral, and I'm hearing the stories of how he was as a child and how he was in the last few years of his life, and letting go of that idea that my dad was supposed to be my protector.
Mm-hmm.
My dad was supposed to be the one that took care of me. And but thinking about it in the perspective of finally knowing what he went through as a child, he didn't have the resources to be that person for me.
Mm-hmm.
He was injured himself, and he was so far injured that he couldn't step up to be that father figure that I needed.
Yeah.
And with that, I was able to release a lot of that pain and anger that I have been holding on to for so many years.
Well, that's the understanding the humanity of who we are as pastors, as ministers. I wish we were on it 100% every single day. I wish we were climbing mountains that nobody else can climb and telling everybody, come on, you can do it. Because there are some days we can't do it and we don't have it in us. Yeah. So we just plow through it, and physically sometimes. A few weeks ago when I was suffering with sciatica, and I had to plow through like 4 weddings and a Sunday and service, and I've just plowed through it, and I was in pain. I could
like this week after my procedure, and I have to go take care of 2 weddings.
Yeah, you just do it.
Right.
And that's when life sucks.
It does.
And but here we are.
I
And
honestly think, though, kind of going back to what you had previously said about vulnerability,
Mhm.
I honestly feel as though we become better leaders, we become better ministers, pastors, what have you, when we share our vulnerability and people see how we are working through it.
Yeah. So we get here to the end of April and going into May, and I feel positive about the rest of the year. And as much as, there's a little bit of a struggle here and there, but we work through it all the time. And I think it's a challenge for us to find ways of expressing our vulnerability, finding ways to deal with sometimes the insecurities of our life, needing to forgive, needing to move forward, needing to hold fast to what we believe. And that's kind of where my heart's at is, after this week, it was like, these are the standards that we believe and hold on to. And started with, our LGBTQ brothers and sisters and siblings, standing firm to say, we love you, we accept you, we embrace you, you are welcome in this place and in this space and in our lives. If we don't understand, we're going to ask the question. I don't get it. So if you don't understand the pronouns, ask. It's that simple.
It really is.
And so
And if you mess up, just admit it and move on.
Yeah. And if somebody's offended you or hurt you, start with just learning how to examine your own self. Where have I dropped the ball? Where did I fail?
The word that we came up with the other day that really was prevalent for us was integrity. Living your life with integrity.
Yeah. Yeah. So you can't say, Scripture says you can't say that you love God and hate your brother or hate your sister. You can't do that. Period.
One of the 10 commandments is love thy neighbor.
Love your neighbor, not just your straight neighbor, and not just your gay neighbor either.
Thy neighbor is every neighbor.
Yeah, I can think of it comes to my mind is when I went to the Club Q memorial and all the protesting and all the hate that was outside of that. And then when I went in there, all I felt as an ally, for me, as a clergy member and an ally, I didn't hear one word of hate. Not one. I saw people clinging to each other, people loving each other, people wanting to express love outside of that. And I was moved by that because I find, I take for granted the fact that I'm not living in fear of walking out of, our church, our building, or our work. Now I might.
Yeah.
But we don't live in that fear. But I saw nothing but love from, everyone that was there. And it made my heart feel, compassion and for all those that were just hurting because they have to live in fear every single day. Members of the LGBTQ community. So I think that's where my heart's been this week. And speaking from my heart is really challenging us to love each other. And I even do little silly things like whenever I see somebody put some kind of hate speech, even on my Facebook page or any one of them, I think I've 3 or 4, but some kind of hate speech or transphobia or anything on there, I delete it. I don't even want it on my page. I even am angry that I even had to look at it. And so I take that seriously, because I don't find any, even if somebody's trying to be humorous, I don't find any humor in that.
Right.
I talked to, one of our Progressive Christian Alliance leaders who's looking to create somewhat of an underground railroad to help transgender people get out of Tennessee because of the discrimination and the hatred that they're facing living in a very conservative state. And that's just blows me away.
I mean, at what point does it stop? I mean, they're fining people and, promoting jail time for people who are doing what they feel is cross-dressing. But what if I put on an oversized hoodie, put on some jeans and some sneakers and a ball cap, and I just, is that considered cross-dressing?
Yeah. Well, that's kind of where our heart's at, and we just wanted to open up kind of an open dialogue today. And maybe, I like the idea of doing this. It's a great way to wrap up the month. We just finished Lent and Easter, which were beautiful celebrations. And, I'm thankful for everything we did. I'm thankful for each one of the messages that we spoke during the Lenten season. I'm thankful for our chocolate and wine Sunday that everybody.
It's become a favorite day of mine for every year now.
So if you weren't here, now you got to wait till next year. So, but here at Amazing Love Sanctuary, our goal is to really find a way to continue to grow, and as individuals, grow as a congregation, grow with our virtual online audience, and hopefully it speaks a word of grace and love. And the words that are in my mind that I just feel like I'm really pressed on are unconditional love, total acceptance, and unreserved grace. Those are my three things. If you don't like those, I'm not going to compromise those values going forward. And that's just where my heart's at. Yeah. So, next we'll talk about some other stuff, but if you need us, we're always available. We're always wandering around here in the chapel, in the offices, and, pray for us. We'll pray for you if you have any specific concerns or needs. Make sure you let us know. I mean, we care about everyone that's participating in this, and we want to make sure that we're there for you. And so, how did we do?
I have another prayer that we can close us out.
I'll let you wrap it up.
If the other one even got on there. So again, this one is from the book Progressive Prayers for Progressive People, and it is on the past, present, and future. Good and queer in God. Sometimes we get so caught up in planning the future and remembering the past that we miss opportunities in the here and now. Rather than focusing on the realities of now, we concentrate on skewed memories of what was hopeful, or hopeful projections of what could be. Let us be called to each moment. May we stay aware of how the past informs them and be reminded of how, when stitched together in just the right way, they can create a better future. May we never gaze on the past or the future so steadily that we lose the opportunity of living in and experiencing love in each moment. Instead, let us be inspired to honor our past by carving out new and creative futures through the choices we make each day. Let us encourage, embolden, and empower each other to have the perseverance to practice love, even if doing so sometimes makes us feel uncomfortable, unsure, or unstable, simply because we are uncertain of what the outcome might look like. Let us learn to prize the journey and the love shared, trusting in the love more and more each time as we more fully embrace each moment and live in it.